welcome everyone for joining us today for this special webinar, Adventures in Philately webinar. We actually ran some webinars we were just discussing probably about a year ago now, and time has just flown by, but now we're really pleased to be doing another one. So I'm joined here today by Marcus, Orsi and Devlan Kruck, who are from the Museum of Philately, and they also both work for David Feldman Auctioneers, based in Geneva, although they travel extensively. So today we're going to be, first of all, discussing Sperati and his forgeries, his process of how he created these forgeries, and I really want to know why he did them. So we'll be discussing that. If you've got any questions at all, just pop them in the chat box, and I'll be keeping an eye on those, and I'll just kind of interject as and when we get questions. So feel free to put those in whenever you like. After that, we'll be just giving a brief pause for any more questions about that subject before we go on to the Rowland Hill Medal, which the Museum of Philately are running at the moment, and you can actually vote on that on different exhibits that are displayed on the Museum of Philately website. So we'll get to that as well. That's really exciting. But for now, I will share the screen, and Devlan and Marcus, if you want to take it away, and just let me know when you'd like to change the slides, because I'm controlling them.
Oh yeah, so what will we just say slide? Or
yes,
change?
that sounds good. Yeah, it's a bit like all the COVID briefings all those months ago.
Well, welcome everybody. I don't know how many of you are out there. Devlan, you want to say hello?
Hello everybody, it's good to be here, and yeah, look forward to sharing some insights that we've learned over the last sort of few months on Sperati.
Well, it's greetings. I'm in a very wet Ireland at the moment. The rain is pattering on my windows, so it's dark and wet over here. But anyway, it's great to see you all. You know, as we were preparing earlier with Devlan, I was thinking, you know, this is possibly, I mean, I've been in the business 40 years, and it's possibly one of the most exciting events in my philatelic career. This discovery, if you want, of a large part of the atelier, what's an atelier? What's an atelier in English?
Oh, you're asking me? Sorry.
Yeah. An atelier in English. I can never think of the name. But anyway, it's his work in progress, and it was just an amazing opportunity to look at what Sperati had created in his atelier over the years, and all the various different aspects of the creation of his forgeries all came together in this huge accumulation of material, which will be going under the auction hammer in a week or two, and we'll touch on that later on. But I think we can move forward with the agenda here. Devlan, you've got an icebreaker for us. Maybe you want to just explain what an icebreaker is from your perspective.
Yeah, the icebreaker, when we get to it, is just really just to get everybody into the mood and make us feel more relaxed. So we've got a little question that we're going to ask you. It does relate to the topic that we're talking about this evening. And once we've done that, we'll move on with the main event. So the icebreaker is, which one of these is a Sperati reproduction? All three are the same sort of stamp. They're sort of quite an iconic issue, but you've got to work out which one of these is a Sperati reproduction. And I think you should get pop up in your Zoom like a voting thing that you can vote for, which if you can't see, then send Matt a message. Right, we'll give you the answers a bit later on, so we'll move on with
to the next slide.
So yeah, Sperati, the unique stamp artist. Yeah, we want to sort of explore why and how he did what he did, and it's fundamental in understanding this very fascinating stamp forger, or stamp artist as he called himself, is trying to understand the motive behind what he did and why he did it. In the world of philately stamp collecting, we all come across fakes, forgeries, and material that sometimes purports to be one thing but it's something else. And nearly in all those cases, it's because there's some sort of money angle, that someone's trying to fool the collector or swindle the collector out of some money. The interesting thing about Sperati is his original intentions and his motives seem to be different. And it'd be interesting to explore some of the facts with you and see what you think when we get to the questions and answers session at the end. But Sperati embarks on a project to demonstrate his art form by fooling experts. And if we go to the next slide, we've got his own words. He basically, in his autobiography, said, "I embarked on a project to obtain documentary evidence of the inability of experts to detect my imitations, be they professionals or dealers, and to make available my products as works of art, which status the opinion of experts justified." So that's an interesting confession. We'll have to sort of try and decide as we go along whether that was something after the fact or was something that really was at the heart of what he was doing. So if we move to the next slide.
Wait, before we go to the next slide, Matt, could you go to the previous slide? I just want to, I just wanted to just interject the thing we always love is these iconic glasses that he's wearing, these kind of weird glasses where he's got a pair of glasses on. I wear glasses, but he's got a pair of glasses on with another pair of sort of binocular glasses in front of them. And the fun part about it is that those glasses are going to be part of the auction in a couple of weeks. So anyway, it's just that's one of the most iconic images of him, isn't it, Devlan?
Yeah, I mean, in fact, we've got several different images in this presentation. Pretty much all of them have got these binocular glasses on, and you won't find too many people in philately that won't recognize that image of him. Yeah.
Anyway, sorry. Yes, we can go on. Shoot on two slides. There we go. Oh yes. All right.
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what we were saying, just maybe putting things into context. Forgeries, for the most part, we as collectors realize that most of the time people are trying to fool the collector. They really are trying to fool us to get us to buy something that isn't genuine or pull the wool out of our eyes. And that's the general consensus when it comes to forgeries. And then of course there's the classic postal forgery, where the post office is being fooled. And so those are the two like classic forgeries, the postal forgery being actually probably the most valuable forgery, because it did actually go through the posts, and it was to fool the post office. It was to enable the sender to get the postage for free, if you want, because he created the postal forgery. So postal forgeries are fantastic. I love them. Forgeries for collectors, there's a lot of very bad ones out there. There are some good ones, but Sperati didn't really set out to fool the collector. He set out to fool the experts, right, Devlan?
That's right. That's what he said, and indeed, that's what he did.
Could we go to the next slide?
So here's his sort of curriculum vitae, if you like. Sperati basically, with his own hands, created the greatest collection of world rarities as forgeries. He's on record as producing 234 reproductions that were certified, 124 different stamps from 17 different experts or professionals who he fooled. And this wasn't just in France, he did it in Germany, England, Spain and Italy. He's known to have reproduced over 558 scarce stamps, which he had printing dies for. I mean, in fact, that number sort of seems to increase because we keep discovering new ones, which we can talk about as we go along. But that's basically his credentials as a stamp artist or stamp forger, depending on your viewpoint.
And wasn't there that apocryphal sort of story about the fact that he showed up with an album of stamps, and he presented the album to a group of experts, and then the experts had a look and were enamored and awed by this amazing collection of, you know, classic stamps, and they really couldn't believe it. And then when he said, well, what if I could produce a second book, and he did this, and they were still in awe. So I think after the 5th or 6th book, I think they started to get the message that there was something going on here.
Yeah.
But I don't know whether that's a true story or it's apocryphal, but I certainly from my limited sort of experience with Sperati over the years, that's what I had heard. And you know, one of the things I forgot to say before we started was that, you know, Devlan and I are certainly not experts in Sperati. I would have handled Sperati forgeries in the course of business over the years, but our, you know, appreciation and our interest, and perhaps we're a little bit more knowledgeable today, has really been, you know, enhanced by this archive that's been found. So we are obviously aware that you guys out there may even have more knowledge about this subject than we do. So we're excited that if questions come through, I just wanted to let you know we're no experts in Sperati. He was quite an enigma, and there's, I think, much more to discover as we unfold our webinar this evening. Next slide.
Yeah, so we've talked about Sperati fooling the experts, and I guess we all kind of
experts at the time.
Yes, I guess we would assume that's the expert at the time. But here's a stamp that had a certificate in 2020, January 2020, a genuine certificate. So it went to a very reputable expert authority. I won't mention their name because I want to spare their blushes, but it was then submitted for auction, and it was spotted as a forgery. So it was resubmitted, and then they said, yep, okay, yeah, you're right, it's a Sperati forgery. So he was that good at his art that he's still fooling experts even today with all our technology and our reference books, which we're going to go on to talk about. So
which I have to say, in my experience, is pretty rare, because there are, other than Sperati, there are still good forgeries that are going on, but for the most part, forgeries, once we know what they look like, the paper and so on, they become very well known, and we can spot them pretty easily. Whereas Speratis are not that. That's not the case, and that's what's incredible about his craft, is that even decades later, he is still fooling people. So it's a real tribute to him. Yeah, next slide.
One of the things I wanted to talk about, having sort of handled this new archive, is what was apparent to me was the extraordinary lengths that Sperati went to. I just don't know of any forger or person who's involved in this sort of game that spent so much time, put such a financial investment in, and I say that because the techniques that he was using required him to use chemicals, paper, film, glass. All these things weren't easy to come by, and they were quite expensive. And whilst I appreciate that he had family that owned a printing mill, and so he had access to both the processes of printing and some of the chemicals and the papers and stuff like that, it's still an extraordinary amount of money that he invested to get to a point where he could produce stamps that were good enough to fool the experts. And what really stands out when you look at the material and the process that he's followed is just how meticulous he was and how elaborate his processes were, because he wanted to make absolutely certain that people couldn't detect his reproductions as forgeries.
Yeah, and we were saying then earlier, Devlan, is we were sort of asking the question, and sort of a question we can throw out there is, would it be possible for a modern day Sperati to exist? In other words, would there be somebody of that technical ability, and also had the, in a sense, the focus to be able to produce these amazing reproductions. And I think our sense is that probably not. I would imagine that it will be very difficult to repeat that, even with all the technology that we have today. I think it would be very difficult to do what he did.
Next.
Yeah.
So here he is, the man, again with his legendary glasses. His aim was to demonstrate his art, and he wanted that to be considered as genuine. But how would he make this known to the world? Well, there's two views on this. If we go to the next slide, some say that Sperati, in some shape or form, deliberately got himself entangled with the French authorities when he sent this sheet of 18 stamps to a Portuguese dealer who he'd done business with in the past. And some of these stamps are obviously quite rare and iconic, and they're intercepted by the customs, and they decided to prosecute him for exporting stamps without declaring them. Now, this kind of incident in 1942, which sort of dragged on to 1948 while he was trying to prove that they weren't genuine stamps, and so they couldn't prosecute him for avoiding duty, went on for about 6 years, but it revealed really to a wider audience his skill and his art. And although he was acquitted in 1948 for that charge, they did sort of kind of charge him with deceitful intentions, because one of the things that they eventually said was, look, yeah, you're right, okay, these are copies or forgeries or reproductions, but you didn't make it known, you've not marked these as reproductions. And although he didn't serve any time, he obviously he had that deceitful intentions charge against him. It's interesting at this point in 1948, if you ask yourself this question, if he wasn't making it as clear as he could have that these reproductions were counterfeit or reproductions, then is his explanation for his motives valid? And I'm not making a judgment on that. I mean, I'm fascinated with Sperati just like the next person, but I just wonder if his being caught with his fingers in the cookie jar and not actually making it clear that these were reproductions at the time could be the basis for questioning his motive. But anyway,
well, I mean, it comes back to that question in a sense. Ultimately, why did he embark on this project in the first place? You and I speculated that it could have been the fact that it was a kind of vanity project, and it wasn't sort of financially driven, and maybe it was just to prove what a great what a great artist he was. So it wasn't really, it doesn't fit really with the idea of what we know as forgers. It's a little bit of an anomaly. No, wouldn't you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very difficult to sort of argue against that, because his records showed that he didn't charge that much to the people he was selling some of these reproductions. I mean, they were sort of, there's figures of single percentage kind of equivalents to what the rarities would command in the open market. So yeah, no, as you say, I think enigma is a good word for him.
Yeah. Next slide.
Now, of course, being such an enigma, there's been many things written about Sperati. The sort of the books that people are most familiar with are the sort of volumes, the 2 volumes produced by the BPA, which is the work of Jean de Sperati. This was produced in 1955, and it's got like the text which accompanies the plate. So it's really kind of the tools that you need to hand to detect Sperati forgeries. This really is sort of detailed stuff, and these are not easy to get hold of. They do come up in auction, and they sometimes come up through sort of the retail business, retail trade.
So what? I guess the BPA book basically has one part which is the text, which explains the difference between the genuine and the forgery. in great detail, and then it has a book of plates, which then you can then take the text and look at. You can really compare, right? I think that's how it works.
You can get your magnifying glass out.
Yeah.
And I guess also the other thing it gives you is this kind of like inventory of all the different countries that he produced reproductions from, and which stamps, which leads me nicely to the next book, which is kind of like the authority on it today, which I suppose every professional philatelist has a copy of, is the work of Jean de Sperati II, which includes previously unlisted forgeries. And this was a book which Robson Lowe and Karl Warski produced in the early 2000s, and it really is a fantastic piece of work. It's much more detailed, and of course it demonstrates that even though the BPA acquired his archive, they didn't know about everything that he'd been up to, which was quite interesting. The other book, which is quite small, which I really like, is just a nice insight into the man himself, is Kenneth Chapman's book on Sperati, the Sperati story, and that's a little bit easier to get hold of, and quite inexpensive compared to the other two books. So next slide. So I mentioned Robson Lowe. I mean, Robson Lowe is a famous philatelist, postal historian. He was an auctioneer, a dealer. I mean, he was a huge figure in the industry. He's basically a self-confessed admirer of Jean de Sperati, and he was instrumental in acquiring the archive for the BPA. So he dealt directly with Sperati in getting it in the 50s, and then ensured that he could produce this book. And then he stuck with it. I mean, he worked alongside Karl.
And just to jump in there, Devlan, when we talk about the archive, we are talking about the archive of the if you want to say the actual printed forgeries, an archive of the forgeries. The archive that we're going to be unveiling today is his work in progress. Two things that are quite different, so we don't want to get those confused. The archive that Robson Lowe was handling and creating the book from was an archive of the finished product.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, next slide.
And one of your favorites, right?
Karl. Yeah, Dr. Karl Warski, but Karl Warski, yeah, I mean, he's recognized in the philatelic world as being pretty much an expert on forgers and forgeries. I mean, he was a man that I think was more interested in the forger and what motivated the forger and the processes of the forger followed. And he was well qualified. He's a theoretical nuclear physicist, so a very bright individual. And it's clear when you look at his work on Sperati that he was absolutely captivated by Sperati. And I think that it takes quite a lot to captivate a man of such intelligence. So that gives you an idea of the caliber of Sperati's work, in that Karl Warski, who was exposed to probably pretty much every renowned forger in his sort of studies and his collecting, did focus on Sperati, and in fact I put Sperati investigate. He pursued him almost for a lifetime, and he found all sorts of things that were never known about Sperati and about Sperati's work, and about items that nobody had ever even thought for a minute were forgeries. So
and then of course Karl is the father of an eminent collector, Stephen Walski. So the father obviously instilled a passion for philately, and Stephen went on to build probably the greatest collection of French stamps. So it was just interesting, the passion. This is one of the great things that we love to do and encourage, is encourage fathers to encourage their sons or daughters to collect. And this is one of the things that we've got to be doing. We need to be promoting. This is what the Museum of Philately is all about, is promoting philately and getting a new generation of collectors. And it's just Karl Walski is a perfect example of a man who loved the craft, particularly when it comes to Sperati, but also passed that passion on to his son. So his son is almost as knowledgeable and as passionate as the father was.
Next slide.
Next slide. Right. Oh, yeah. No. Go. Can you go back there, Matt?
Sorry, guys. I just wanted to ask a question.
Yeah.
We had one question come in.
Yeah.
Wendy asked, did he work alone or did he train anyone? So we may get to this as you go, but was it all just him?
I think it was all just him. I haven't seen anything which indicates he had a partner in crime or even had a student or anything working alongside him.
And it probably would have been difficult to have, especially in doing what he was doing, creating forgeries, to have many people really knowing what he was doing. He probably kept it relatively under wraps, I would have thought. Wouldn't you say, Devlan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and he does seem quite a private individual. I mean, I think he is quite obscure in many respects in his personality. If you read about him, you know, and I think
so. We're now getting into the nitty gritty. I mean, Devlan and I both said we're going to try and be quick tonight and not keep you guys too late. But half an hour has gone by already, and we're just getting to the fun part. Well, anyway, so Sperati initially, as we can see here on the left, initially decided to start producing his forgeries using copper plates. And copper, if anybody knows anything about copper, it's a relatively malleable, soft metal. So you can quite easily engrave and create beautiful objects out of copper plates. So he started the processes using copper plates, and in this auction coming up in a couple of weeks, we'll mention it later. There are a number of examples of these copper plates, but because he was such a precise individual, really wanted to create a quality product. In the end, he found that the copper plates really didn't give him what he wanted. So he then went to the photolithography process. And we can go to the next slide, I think. Again, this is another example of a copper plate with the trial essay from the copper plate. Next slide. So here we've got a rather detailed explanation for what photolithography is, and I'll let you read that as we talk. But the photolithography was on like a polymer or a plastic or a celluloid process, and it was always negative, right, Devlan? It was always a negative impression.
Yeah.
So that's the celluloid process, and then there was that process of light and chemicals that gave him you can see the detail on the celluloid is quite incredible. So that was in the end he settled on the celluloid, but we can go to the because this is sorry, I didn't see that, but he also used glass. So the item to the right is a glass slide, and the one to the left of the celluloid. So he used glass as well, but again, glass being pretty fragile, and of course there are many glass slides that are going to be shown throughout this auction, but he really felt that the celluloid was much more malleable, obviously not prone to breaking, and easier to use. Next slide. Here we've got, so we have various brands that are used. So these would have been, I guess these are photographic brands, aren't they, Agfa?
Yeah. So he was very fascinated with the photographic process. In fact, although he was a stamp collector as a boy, he was also very interested in photography. As I mentioned earlier, he had relatives who were involved in printing. So he got a very detailed understanding of the printing process and chemicals, and through his brother was a photographer, and through this photography, he started to realize that if he could combine his artistic eye and his love for stamps, the printing processes, and this chemical kind of photographic sort of knowledge that he had, that he could perhaps produce replicas, and indeed you'll see on these two examples that he's got his dated, June 51, and you'll see that although it looks a bit like a doctor's prescription, you can sometimes make out his handwriting. So there's AGFA, which was basically a photographic company that produced papers and chemicals so that people could take pictures and print them. And sometimes even a brand within AGFA, like Isopan, but there's other companies like Ilford and Kodak, and so he had access to some pretty sexy sort of bits and bobs. Really, these things wouldn't have been that easy to get hold of without having money or relatives.
And if you can see on your screens, if you can really look, the incredible detail, because I know this stamp, the post locale stamp of Switzerland, I know it quite well, and that detail that he's created there is quite amazing. And I think that's what's important, is to appreciate as we go through this, appreciate the sheer brilliance of the man.
Yeah.
Next slide.
Yeah, I mean, these aren't particularly attractive to look at unless you've got them in your hands, and then you sort of it's really magical. This is the front and back of a matrices that he's retouched, so he's painted around the outside to avoid any additional light exposure, but also when you look at it in detail, he's even retouched the image where he sees imperfections. So a bit like what some of the printers did with copper plates. If they saw there was errors, they've retouched them.
Re-engraved them. Yeah.
Re-engraved. Next slide. And here's just two examples: a celluloid cliche and then a glass support one. But I mean, you can just see there the colours and the sort of detail is incredible.
Next slide.
And then here's one with the final reproduction and a glass sort of example of one of the support cliches. And the date is 2nd of 35. So he was at it a long time.
Next slide.
And the reason why I want to show this one is in the previous slide that he used to remove the design of the stamps with chemicals, and he'd even paint the actual cancellation, so he retained that but removed the image, so that when he put his own reproduction print on it, it was on the correct paper with the right watermark. Those are the sort of lengths he went to, and hence why he was able to fool many experts, because they would often hold it up to the light, say, yeah, that's the right watermark. Oh yeah, the right perforations, it's the right paper. But the thing was, and even the right cancellation, but the print itself was his. So
often modern forgers don't think about these things. Modern forgers do things, and we can see the forgeries easily because they haven't really investigated the genuine stamps and seen what the genuine stamp was supposed to look like. So the great thing about Sperati is he actually studied the genuine stamp. He studied and understood what the genuine stamp looked like, and both for overprints or cancellations as well, he studied them so he could really reproduce something, and with the knowledge. That's the key. So often modern forgers, or even forgers going back in time, didn't really do their homework, whereas this guy did do his homework, and he obviously had probably a reasonably decent reference collection of real genuine stamps to help him in his process. Next slide.
Just before we move on, we just had a question from Leon, who just asks, what is a cliche? So I think that was on the previous slide.
So cliche. Here I'm going to try and find. I guess a cliche would be the design, the simple design within the parameter of the celluloid or the glass. The cliche is the object itself. That's what we would call a cliche. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Hope that's clear to him. Okay. Next slide. Okay. So here we have. Now I unfortunately have not been in Geneva the last 8 or 9 weeks, so I haven't had much interaction, whereas Devlan has been helping with some of the descriptions. But this is the auction. The auction takes place, as you can see it, on the 7th of December. And what I would encourage you, if you have a real interest in this subject, is one, download the catalog from the David Feldman website. And if you're really, really that interested and want to know more and want to have a souvenir, write in and request a hard copy catalog. But what you will find, which we haven't been able to cover in this webinar, what you will find is the incredibly detailed descriptions that really give you everything you really want to know about the various different lots and the groups in the auction. Devlan, you have a comment to make?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing to make is that since Karl Wolski's work on it, that there hasn't been anything substantial come to market. No sort of new discoveries of this scale. So it's really important if you're a philatelist, or even if you're just interested in this chap, to try and get a look at the website and look at some of these images, because there are stamps that are included in this sale which nobody previously was aware that Sperati even attempted to reproduce, and that's sort of quite.
And obviously the two stamps on the cover, the iconic Post Office Mauritius, and then the famous 3 skilling yellow of Sweden. So those are, but I guess we can't really say more than this is a unique opportunity. And I say unique, we often use the word unique, and we sort of bandy it around a lot, but this is a unique opportunity. Even if you're not a buyer in this auction, it's a unique opportunity to acquire, if you were able to get the catalog, acquire a tremendous amount of knowledge about the craft of the man. Next slide. Well, maybe, well, isn't the VR one of the things that has previously not been recorded?
Yeah, that's right. We weren't aware that he worked on that. So there's some pretty stunning images in the catalogue, but it's such an iconic stamp anyway, the penny black.
Yeah.
So yeah,
and we can't really do the catalogue or the auction justice in 20 minutes or half an hour on a webinar. You really need to go and have a look. So again, I do encourage you to have a look at the catalog online on the David Feldman website. I think we're gonna go to questions now. Next slide. Yeah. So we thought we'd take a pause now before we move to the next part of our chat tonight, and just ask if there are questions coming through.
We haven't got any at the moment, but I'd like to ask, comparing, say, that the Post Office Mauritius there, how does the value of the Sperati forgery compare with the real thing?
Well, yeah, I mean, no, you can't compare. I mean, the Sperati forgery could be thousands, but the genuine Mauritius stamp, especially the unused one, is probably today millions. So
maybe that's a bad example. I think that's
it probably is. I mean, I would say there are probably some Sperati forgeries where the genuine stamp is not that far away from the Sperati, but generally speaking, I would say it's going to be, what would you say, a tenth of the value. Where you might have a stamp that's valued at 1,000 and a Sperati would be 100. But I think that's creeping up because the interest, and I think it's because of people like Karl Wolski and obviously the amazing Sperati forgeries that have come on the market over the years. I think there's a lot more interest in forgeries than there was.
Yeah.
People were always afraid of forgeries and scared of forgeries and didn't want to talk about them. Now people are fascinated by forgeries, fascinated by, again, the concept and why do people create forgeries. So I think there are actual collectors of forgeries, and then of course collectors who are collecting a particular subject collect the genuine stamp, but they also want to understand the mind of the forger. So they often have part of their collection showing the forgeries that have been done of the stamps that they collect. So it's become part of mainstream philately, mainstream stamp collecting to investigate the forgeries that exist.
Yeah. Yeah, it's become a study in its own right.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. We've just got a few more questions coming in, actually. Are there any more? I guess this is a tricky question to answer. Are there any more stamps out there of his that are undiscovered?
Oh, you mean not forgeries, just stamps in
No,
general?
Sperati, presumably Sperati, forgeries out there. Is it likely that there would be? Is it likely that?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, indeed, what this auction shows is that there's stamps out there that we weren't aware of. And indeed, as Karl Warski proved, if you put enough time and effort in to try and investigate stamps, you're going to find some. And I'm absolutely certain there'll be new discoveries in the future.
Which is one of the wonderful things about any hobby, any collecting hobby, is if everything is known and everything is out there, what's the point in looking? So that's one of the beauties of one of the things I love about my own personal collection is we're always discovering things. There's always things to find, and that's, as I said, the beauty of the hobby.
Yeah. And is it would you say it's common for for a collection to come onto the market and for it to have Sperati forgeries in there? Was he that prolific that
Oh, absolutely,
you may have collected it without knowing that they had a forgery?
Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, as we pointed out earlier, that one stamp that fooled an expert just a year or two ago. So the reality is absolutely, and knowledge is gained quickly, but it's also lost quickly. So time goes by and all of a sudden people don't know who Sperati is or haven't heard of him, and all of a sudden somebody unscrupulous person trying to pass Sperati's off as genuine, and all of a sudden it starts again. So yeah.
I mean, he's the most revered and probably the most dangerous stamp forger that's ever existed, and I would doubt that anybody would ever be able to follow in his footsteps.
Yeah. And I think you mentioned briefly, Devlan, that he worked for quite a long period of time. So do we know how long he kind of did the forgeries for, worked on them?
Yeah, well, he started in the early 20s. Maybe he started before that, but by 1955, his eyesight had diminished and his health, and so that's when he decided to sort of hang up his kind of binoculars and sell his archive of reproductions. But yeah, I mean, the cliches even in the collection we've got date back to the 20s, and there's several in the sort of 50s. He was still working quite hard on several complex reproductions in the 50s when he sort of decided to hang up his binoculars.
Yeah.
So yeah, he was prolific. I mean, I've heard sort of other stories about him that during the war, the British intelligence people employed his services to help them with certain counterfeiting and stuff like that, and I think he's a character that appears in some sort of fictional novels as well, sort of wartime novels. So yeah, he's a man that was not just fascinating within philately. He was a man that was respected and revered outside of philately. These are tiny little effigies, and he was able to copy them and fool everybody. They're much bigger than other sort of counterfeits out there. So yeah, he's a pretty iconic sort of forger or stamp artist.
Yeah. Okay. Brian's asked, how did this material come to light? How was it actually discovered?
Well, it's obviously it's come through the family of the heirs and the family of Sperati. So that's how it comes to light. I mean, okay. There was no I now have discovered the word I was looking for earlier. It's his workshop. When I say atelier, it's his workshop. So when you say atelier, you'd say the atelier of an artist. So what would happen was, at the end of his life, all his life work is presumably left in a room somewhere in his workshop, and all that life's work presumably at some point was boxed up and kept. And sometimes things, maybe some of the problems he had with with some of the legal issues he had. Maybe they didn't want to bring this stuff out. Maybe they were afraid that might be some repercussions. So something like this, which is probably at the time quite controversial, gets buried in a family. And maybe they even, I mean, who knows? I'm just speaking out loud here. I'm just my own thoughts. Maybe even the family were embarrassed, you know. Maybe there was some kind of like, ugh, you know, we don't really want to, you know, old Uncle Jean, you know. You know what he used to do, you know, and so maybe that got buried. And so then obviously in recent years it came to light. And of course the provenance is so important with everything. So I can confirm that the provenance is originally coming from the family of Jean de Sperati.
Wow, excellent. Okay, Leon's just asked, where is Sperati buried? Not sure if we know where he is. Where he?
I would assume France. I would have thought.
I would imagine.
He's Italian, but he lived his life in France. So
not sure.
Leon also asked a little earlier just about the video, where we're going to share it. We'll actually you'll get an email tomorrow. Everyone who's registered, whether you're here or whether you didn't make it, you'll get an email tomorrow just telling you where the recording will be. And I'll also just look through any of the questions and might just add a few useful links onto that page. So you'll get that tomorrow via Zoom, that email. Just a few other comments. We've had Lawrence has said he had a forgery of the Theresienstadt, if I'm saying that right.
Theresienstadt.
Yeah, and someone purchased it as a forgery. And Ian's just commented he has several Sperati forgeries and lithos, and they're a great addition to my collection. Very excited for the auction. So
okay,
thank you, Ian. That's great.
Well, thanks everyone for all your questions.
Yeah, that's great. So
next slide.
Yeah, we'll crack on.
Yeah, great. Well, look, obviously a completely different subject, yet at the same time staying with the theme of the Museum of Philately, which is sponsored by David Fellman, but the Museum of Philately, the Rowland Hill Medal. I mean, Devlan and I sort of talked about what we wanted in this medal, and we both realized that, you know, the father, if you want, the father of philately is without doubt Rowland Hill. You would agree, wouldn't you, Devlan?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
You being the lover of Rowland Hill, give us a little blurb on Rowland Hill.
Well, also he's known the world over, isn't he? You know, you can't separate Penny Blacks from Rowland Hill and Rowland Hill from Penny Blacks. So the philatelic journey began with you know, the work that he did in bringing about postal adhesives, prepaid stamp mechanism. So yeah, and this medal is something that we want to sort of award to the best collection that's gone on to the museum, and we've got 21 nominees, and we started the voting on the 18th of October, and it closes in 2 days' time. So this is an opportunity for you out there, if you want to have a look at the entries and to decide if you like any of them. You can actually vote yourself, because the voting is a public vote, so the winner will be awarded by you guys. So and the medal will be awarded at Monacaville on the 25th of November, and then announced sort of via our blog in the week after, so and through social media. Yeah,
and one of the things to sort of, you know, one of the things that we actually, Mac, you can go to the next slide. You know, one of the things that we've tried to do with the museum is to present collections that have won major awards, but we also have traditional philatelic collections, so what we would call classic collections from the traditional aspect of collecting, then the postal history, then the thematic, and then on to the open class. And so we've sort of tried to include those kinds of different collections. And of course, part of the Museum of Philately is to also educate the collecting world, and to hopefully attract new young collectors, both male and female. We could go to the next slide. So just so you can see, here we have just I'm not going to go through the names here, but just so we've got a smashing of different types of collectors from different parts of the world. We have some lady collectors as well. Next slide. Again, these are another group, again, from different parts of the world, the UK, the US. There's some English collectors there, Italians. You know, so we've got a real selection. Go next slide, please. Some of these people, of course, will be known to you. Some will not. Next slide, please. So there, the chap in the middle, that's Stephen Wolski. That's the son of Carl Wolski, the guy we were talking about earlier. Next slide. And I think, you know, one of the great things about what we wanted to do, and we've got a few statistics coming up, don't we, Devlan? About what? Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just saying we were always looking to try and do something innovative that would also allow us to sort of reach out to a broader audience, and as Michael said, young and old, male and female. And you know, so I mean, as of today, I mean, with 2 days to go, we're really encouraged by the voting in that 30% of the voters are female. Over 40% are between the ages of 21 to 55, and nearly 10% are under 20. So clearly this award and opening it to the public and making it available to anybody anywhere in the world means that we are reaching a new audience. I mean, these are exhibits that would normally only be seen in an exhibition hall by a very small select number of people. Well, they're now being looked at by people of a variety of age groups, and that they're getting to understand what organised philately is all about and how people arrange and put together an international award-winning exhibit.
Yeah, and also before we go to the next slide, we're all right. We'll just stay on that slide for the moment. I just wanted to make note or make mention of Estelle Leclerc and Isabel Klemke, two wonderful ladies who've been helping us, and they are particularly excited about these statistics, which are really showing a shift. And this is something that I think all of us in philately are asking that question. And you guys out there, you can maybe think about it, asking like, where is the next generation of collectors coming from? I'm 59. I'm actually quite young in real terms. Devlan, you're even younger, right?
Yeah, I am.
But you know, I consider myself almost the last generation of collectors. There aren't that many coming after me, but this is proving that there's interest out there, and the Museum of Philately wants to be, in my opinion, I really want to be on the forefront of helping bring philately to a wider audience. Next slide.
It's the exciting bit.
Oh, right.
So did you manage to figure it out, and have you voted yet? So it's just a reminder. So if we go to the next slide, but this give you a reminder. Whatever, that's it. So one last look at that. And did they vote, Matt? Do you know what have we got?
Yeah, we've got 86% of people have participated, which is brilliant. So if you haven't, you've got 10 seconds, and then I'll end the poll. I won't do a countdown, and then we should be able to see the results. Everyone should be able to see them. So I'll end that now. And
oh, some smarty pants is here.
yeah. Well, I don't know. I don't know the answer.
Okay, so we can reveal it, I think.
It is B.
It is B, yeah. well done. There's 46% of people were all right, so that's really good. I thought the first one would fool people because it was a funny color, but they're obviously it's oxidized a bit, but that didn't fool them.
So
And then I thought the one on the right being a bit cut into would also, they think, oh yeah, that's the forgery. It doesn't look so nice.
Yeah.
But it's B. But it's B, and then alongside that, I don't know if you can see, there's the celluloid cliche which he used to print that. So yeah, it's great.
That's on the next slide.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I mean, not most people got that. It's clearly is it the nicest one? I mean, how did people get that?
It is the nicest one.
Nicest margins, and
maybe I thought it was too good to be true.
Yeah,
that's probably
because those stamps don't come readily with large margins. Well, they can do, but
they can, but not very often. They're normally cut into them.
Yeah.
No.
So well done everybody for that. That's a bit of fun.
And he actually put the postmark on
then after that.
Sorry, can I just ask? And he actually forged the cancel on that, or would that have been added?
I mean, he does forge cancels, and indeed in the archive that we're selling, the David Feldman is selling, there's lots and lots of work that he's done in perfecting his cancels. But often what he did was remove the image from a cheaper stamp, but that was printed on the same paper, and then put his printing on top of it. So, but that's a pretty basic cancellation anyway. But it's one it's common on this stamp.
Yeah, well, you can see that from the others, can't you? That it's
I deliberately picked two that were the same. Yeah. So are there any...
well, all I wanted to do just quickly before we go to questions, just to recap and say that the voting for the Museum of Philately ends I think midnight tomorrow night. So please go to the museum website, and we would love if you voted, because the more the merrier. I think we've got we're in the 790s. We've almost got 800 voters, which we are just bowled over with. We had no concept that it was going to have this much of a following. So we're really excited about that, and we'd love to have a few more votes. So please don't hesitate to go. The medal, as Devlan said, will be presented to the winner on the 25th in Monaco, the Monaco Phil exhibition in the south of France. This is an event that happens every 2 years, sponsored by, of course, the Prince of Monaco and the Prince and the royal family, and of course is probably the premier event in philately this year, certainly. So by all means, if you can get to Monaco, come and see us. We'll be there with bells on, right, Devlan?
Yeah, we'll be there.
And then just one last thing, just to remind you, for the Sperati auction is on the 7th of December. Catalogs are already online. So again, go to the David Feldman website if you need more information. I mentioned the name Estelle Leclerc. That's a name you could put in your mind. You can always contact her or contact us, because I think our emails are coming up, right?
Yep, I think on the next slide we've got
you can always contact us if you want to get a catalog. So
okay, that's good. Someone actually asked they'd like a catalog, so if they just email one of you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And of course, the wonderful, I'm so glad you have that image of the Queen there. Of course, she represents, of course, she was in some ways a collector. So she represents really one of the most famous female collectors we've ever had. So it's great that she's there. Of course, it was her grandfather, right, who was the collector, George the Fifth, right?
Yes.
Devlan?
Yeah. He was a proper collector. Yeah, he was really
proper collector. Yeah, exactly.
He was really keen. He was, he did a lot for philately.
Yeah, he was he was a president, wasn't he, of the royal?
As a prince, he was. Yeah, he stepped down when he became king. Yeah, he did a lot for philately. So yeah, thanks for joining us. If you've got any questions, do email us if you've got any additional information. We'd love to hear from you as well. But we do give a shout out to the Rowland Hill Medal on the museum website if you could go and have a look at that, and also a big shout out to our sponsors, David Feldman, who
and thank you to Matt
and thanks to Matt.
All about stamps. You know, thanks for this opportunity. It's been great. I hope people have learned something.
Yeah, that's great. We're getting just a few comments saying thank you. Just to mention, the December issue of Stamp Collector, which came out last week, we've actually got some of the highlights from the Rowland Hill award in there.
Okay, great.
So you can have a look through and just get a taste and a bit more of a write up about some of the exhibits. And as you can see there, we've had a November issue of Stamp Collector, was a special commemorative issue, and that's just sold very well. It's been really, really popular. So it just kind of shows the influence and I guess the long reign, the kind of the stamp era that came to an end when the Queen passed away. So do have a look at the website. Museum of Philately website and the All About Stamps website. You'll find a lot more information there. And as I said, the recording from tonight's webinar, you'll get an email about that tomorrow evening. So Devlan, Marcus, thank you so much. It's been such fun. We need to do it again soon.
Yes, we do need to do it again. It's kind of made me think that a year's gone by and it's been too long. So we should think about another project.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you to everyone for joining us. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Bye.